Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk a little bit about general purpose lenses. This is a subject that's difficult to cover because there's so many lenses that fall into the general purpose range. Most of them of course are zoom lenses because of the versatility of having a wider focal length, but keep in mind that for the longest time, when SLRs were first introduced and for that first 20 or 30 years, people used 50mm or 35mm as their general purpose lens. So I'm going to include not only the top 4 or 5 Canon zoom lenses, but a couple of excellent prime lenses that I also consider to be great general purpose lenses. So here's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to start out with the ever popular 24-105 f4, then move on to the recently released 24-70, also an f4. Then on to the also recently released but very popular with professionals and very expensive 24-70 f2.8. This is the version 2. And then onto a EF-S lens for our crop frame camera users. The EF-S17-55, also an f2.8. And then round off with some prime lenses, in particular the 24mm 1.4 and the 35mm 1.4. So I'd like to state from the outset that this is a high level review, reviewing the pros and cons of each of these lenses. This is not a review showing the minute detail of each lens and their image quality. If you want to know that sort of information, you want to visit this website, thedigitalpicture.com. Brian has done an amazing job in reviewing every single lens down to its finest detail. And it's a great resource for any photographer wanting to know what they can get out of each lens and wanting to review the quality of any individual lens within the Canon range. Okay, let's start off with a personal favourite of mine, the 24-105 f4. This is an extremely popular lens for good reason. It incorporates a fantastic broad focal length with a reasonable price and an image stabilizer. There's not much compromise in this lens. If we have a look at that wonderful focal length first. Here's a photo at 24mm and then zoomed into 70mm and finally 105. You can see what a great zoom this is. Another example of this is 24 again and 105. So there's the main draw card of this lens, but really this is also a $1,000 lens, and so you're getting a great deal of lens for your money. It's high quality, it's got a great image stabilizer, and it's a reasonable weight. And so there's not a lot of compromise in this lens. Now if we have a look at my highly scientific stuffed gorilla rating system, we'll see that I give it high marks for image quality, high marks for price, the 5 stars or 5 gorillas for zoom range, and reasonable for size and weight. There really is only one downside to this lens, and that's its aperture of f4. So it's not a great lens for low light. It doesn't have the great background blur of other lenses, but overall it's a great all-rounder. Next we have the 24-70 f4. This has just been released in 2012, and I consider this to be a little bit of an oddball of a lens in that it doesn't have the focal length of the 24-105, but it has the same aperture of f4. What it does gain, however, is a macro function, and it's a little smaller. However, it's more expensive. It's about $300 or $400 more expensive than the 24-105. So, I don't know. It's for my money, I'm not sure that this lens gains enough features to make it a worthwhile investment over the 105. The macro feature is certainly a useful one. It's nice to have macro, so this really becomes an all-round lens that can do everything. However, if you have a look at the macro feature, here this is a picture of a tick that I pulled off the dog this weekend, taken with 24-70 in its macro, which it does a fine job of. But if I take the same tick with a genuine macro lens, you'll see how much closer it is. So the macro feature is there, but it's not like a genuine macro lens. It doesn't get right in there. But otherwise, it's a nice enough lens. It's got a good zoom range. It's a nice size. It's got the very latest image stabilizer on it. And it adds macro. So it's pretty much an all-rounder. But for my money, I would prefer the extra focal length of the 105 at the cheaper price. If I have a look at the rating I give this lens, you'll see that I knock it back a bit on price, and of course I knock it back on aperture. The zoom range isn't as good, but once again, it's a good all-rounder. Next up is another personal favourite of mine, and not just mine. This would be the second most popular general purpose professional lens out there. You'll see that most professional photographers would have one of these, or its predecessor. This was refreshed just recently in 2012. And it has an image quality that is as high as any other professional lens out there. In fact, pretty much only prime lenses equal this lens for image quality. That and its excellent aperture of 2.8 make this a top lens. What isn't so wonderful about this lens is it's missing image stabilization still. This was a big disappointment to most people who had the previous 24x70 f2.8, and they were hoping that with this refresh we'd get image stabilization, but they didn't. They focused purely on the image quality, which is fine. The other disappointing factor of this lens is its cost. It's over $2,000 currently, so that's a lot of money to put into a single lens, but overall I think if you can afford it, it's worthwhile. This is a very highly regarded lens for good reason. Looking at its ratings, as you can see, it gets 5 gorillas for image quality and 4 gorillas for zoom range. A decent aperture as well. Really, its only downsides are the lack of that IS and its enormous price. A very highly regarded lens. Next up is what I consider to be a forgotten gem amongst the Canon general purpose high-end zoom lenses, and that's this EF-S17-55 f2.8. What I find amazing about this lens is that it really is a lens that in so many ways is comparable to the far more expensive 24-70 we just talked about. What I mean by that is it has the same aperture, 2.8. It has almost as good image quality. It has a similar zoom range in that it's a 17-55, but remember this is going on a crop sensor, so real world zoom range is actually about 27-88. Similar weight, but most of all it also adds a image stabilizer to the mix. So it's pretty much doing everything its much more expensive brethren's doing, but for a much lower price. Obviously this lens can't go on a full frame, but for those of you lucky enough to be shooting a crop sensor like this little SL1, this is a fantastic all-round lens. What I find curious about this lens, however, is that, you know, it has the image quality of an L-series lens. It has the cost of an L-series lens. It even smells like an L-series lens, but it's not an L-series lens, and you have to wonder why. And I think it's just a marketing thing by Canon, that they didn't want any of their EF-S lenses to be L-series. So I think it deserves a red ring. Let's pop a rubber band on there, and now it's got its own red ring, because basically this is a L-series lens in drag, and if you're shooting a crop sensor camera, this is well worth considering because you get so much lens for your money. Let's take a look at its ratings. As you can see, there's not a lot of compromise in this lens. It pretty much does everything for everyone. It was introduced back in 2006, and frankly, The only drawback of this lens is that it won't fit on a full-frame lens. Full-frame camera. Otherwise, it's a lens that can do everything for everyone. Let's talk about using prime lenses as your general purpose lens for a moment. Now, a lot of people don't even consider a prime lens for general purpose because it doesn't have the versatility of zoom. You don't get that range of zooms, and everybody spends a lot of time focusing on making sure that they've got every zoom range, every focal length covered within their kit. And the reality is you don't need it. There are so many benefits to prime lenses. A prime lens, by its very nature, is less complex because it doesn't have the mechanics and the extra elements required for that zoom. And so because of that, a lot of primes, or just about all primes, have a very low distortion rate and a very wide aperture. Take, for example, one of my favorites, this one, the 24 1.4L. You know, it doesn't get much better than that for aperture. And because you have such a wide aperture, you can do so many things you can't do with other lenses. You can grab that night shot that no one else can get. You can stop that action because you've got a much faster shutter speed because of that aperture. And you're getting a photo that is higher quality because there's just no distortion in these lenses. Very high contrast. You're getting a photo that gives you the wow factor that no other lens can give you. And that's really what it's all about. If you're shooting with an SLR camera, you want to get the photo that looks better than a photo that's taken with, say, a point and click or an iPhone or even a cheaper zoom lens. And that's what prime lenses give you. You lose out in the versatility, but you gain the wow factor because you're getting a photo that looks amazing because these are amazing lenses. And it doesn't have to be a 24mm. I also love the 35mm and the 50mm and the 85mm. All of the prime lenses give image quality and photos that look second to none. And that's because of their aperture and because of the simplicity of the lens. Not only that, but they're reasonably priced as well, most of them. You know, you can get some of the 50, you know, everyone's probably got the 50mm 1.8 or the 50mm 1.4, and you get some amazing photos out of those. And they were the standard general purpose lens for decades. If we have a look at my rating system for lumping both the 24 and the 35 in together here, because they're basically the same ratings for both these lenses. And you can see right away they get no gorillas for zoom or image stabilization, but they get the maximum amount for aperture and image quality. And because of that, you get magnificent photos from these lenses. And to be honest, I use my 24mm prime lens more than I use my zoom lens because of that, because I want that wow photo from my camera. So, where does that leave us? More confused than ever, perhaps? Well, hopefully not. Really what you have to consider here is what's important to you. Are you really looking for that broad focal length in your general purpose lens? Then you're looking for those, maybe the 24 to 105. If you're looking for something more creative, then perhaps you're looking for a prime. But if you're looking for something that's the best of all worlds, then you'd consider the 2.8. If we sort them into these categories, say versatile based on their focal lengths and creative based on their capabilities with very wide aperture, you'll see that the primes sit closer to the creative and the f4s sit closer to the versatile, and the 2.8 sit right between, sort of being the best of both worlds. So I hope this has been useful, and leave a comment down below if you need to know anything else, and otherwise I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for watching.